God we serve to have brought us to this point to be having this discussion about the work he is doing in our school. What today's going to look like is a little bit as follows. We're going to open in prayer, and I'm going to kind of give a little bit of introduction to this conversation this morning. I'm going to hand it over to Ryan Duman, who is the chair of our Expansion and Communication Committee, and he'll introduce the guests we have here as well. And then we'll get right into it, the mission and vision of this school and why we're here today to have this conversation. And then the nuts and bolts of the project, the data that everybody wants to hear, the information about even the surrounding area and neighborhoods, and why we believe that this is a time for God to be doing something great at Trinity. We'll talk about the timelines that we have followed to date and where we think it's going. And then that part where it says work to date, we're really going to walk you through the immense amount of work that the Trinity leadership has already done to get us to this place. It has not been without months and months and months of work and assignments for both our staff and others to arrive at a place where we feel like we can present to the church the needs going forward. And then I'll pass it off to Brian Axman to walk us through a little bit of the financial piece of this when we get into the budget estimates, fundraising, on all the things that are heavy on all of our hearts here as we go. And we'll talk about next steps. And the way I want to set this up too for the conversation side of things, Mrs. Herbert has a microphone, and she's sitting over there. Can you stand up, Steph, or at least let people know who you are? Steph's our assistant principal of academics here, and she will be around to find you if you have questions along the way. I want to take questions as we go here. So whether you're hearing from the architect, the builder, whomever, or for me, from Carl, from Ryan, if you have questions along the way, just put your hand up and stuff will find you. Because I don't want you to forget your questions at the end, because we got a lot to cover today. So with that, I invite Pastor Carl up to start our time together. Let's pray.
Lord Jesus, you were opening the eyes of the blind when you said, I am the light of the world. And by the light that you have shown, you opened our eyes to know a love and a grace and mercy and a truth and a Father in heaven we could know no other way. We thank you for the light that you have shown us. But you also looked at your disciples and you said, you are the light of the world. City on a hill cannot be hidden. We thank you, Lord, for the light that you have shown through this community since 1839. And we thank you for the opportunity we have today to be a light in this world. We pray that you would bless our time together and that our hearts would be aligned with yours, and that we would be listening for your voice as we speak to one another and as we ask questions. We ask for your blessing on this time and for the ministry that goes on day by day, and as the ministry continues into the future, we look forward to seeing how you continue to bless this community to be the light that you called us to be and enabled us to be by the sending of your Spirit through your death and your resurrection for us. In your name, Jesus, we pray. Amen. Amen.
Hi, everybody. As Dr. Seefeld mentioned, my name is Ryan Duman. I am the co-chair for the newly commissioned Expansion and Communications Committee. To do some other intros, I'd like to, my fellow co-chair over here, Jen Serrato, she would stand up. She's also a partner, and if everyone on the Expansion and Communications Committee can stand up. There's quite a few members. We have 10 members from both from the church side and the school side. These are the folks that are going to be working with the committee, and we'll talk a little bit more about the thing we do. Thanks, everybody. Feel free to reach out to those folks, afterwards. I'm sorry, everybody. Sorry, committee members, but they're willing to hear what you have to say. Also over here, I want to make sure I get everybody's name right because I've just met these folks the same as you all. I have Robert and Steve and Eric. Robert is from Growth, and Steve and Eric are both from Catalyst. And you'll get a little more information about what Growth has done so far in the process and what Catalyst has done as well. But back to the committee, I really want to start off by thanking everybody for being here. I mean, this is fantastic turnout. I think it speaks to our congregation, it speaks to our school and the hearts of the folks that are here today. And my prayer is that as we go through this process, you all continue to be a part of the process. That you all show up and tell us how you're feeling and participate and pray for us. Pray for the committee, pray for the organizations that we work with, and really pray for the leadership team especially. Okay? I want to reiterate right away, this is not a voters meeting. All right, there's been a lot of questions about that. Are we voting? Are we voting? What's happening? We're not voting today, okay? To kind of lay out how that would look, the Expansion Communications Committee has no authority to call a vote. Dr. Seafeld has no authority to call a vote. We have a constitution for our congregation. The Board of Lay Leaders, which I also serve on currently as the treasurer, has the authority, along with Pastor Carl, and there's some other ways, but the way that we foresee this going is that the Board of Lay Leaders will get a recommendation from the Expansion and Communications Committee as they work with Dr. Seafeld and our leadership team at Trinity, and they will eventually, when the time is right, call for a vote. 2 weeks notice is required for any vote, so this thing won't be sprung on anybody. We'll be sure that we communicate when that is coming, if it is coming, and so but that's not today. The BLL, as I mentioned, was commissioned by, the BLL commissioned the Expansions and Communications Committee. And they did so really for a twofold purpose. One is to provide oversight, right? To make sure all the I's are dotted, the T's are crossed, to make sure that we, do we consider this, do we consider that? Okay, that's what the Expansion and Communication Committee first role is. And the second one is communication. Obviously, that's why we call it the Expansion and Communication. The leadership team at Trinity has expressed a really strong desire to make sure that our church members and our school families are aware of what's going on. Nobody wants any wool pulled over your eyes. That's why we're going to be as open and honest as this process goes on as we possibly can. Okay, as part of that, I want to thank our sub-chair, Katrina Hagerbauer. She has already put together a website for the Expansion and Communications Committee. It's up and running. It's minimal right now, as we wanted to get through this meeting first. But Monday, we will download all of this information to be accessible to you. You go to Trinity's website, and you can get to our link. It's up in the right-hand corner or left-hand corner. But you can get to it, and it'll have all that information along with the way in which you can reach out to the Expansion and Communications Committee. So please look for that information. Don't feel as though you have to write everything down. We didn't want to kill a bunch of trees and print all this information out for everyone. But if you have difficulty getting that information, please reach out to us and we'll find a way to get it to you. So those are some of the purposes. I've already introduced the committee. So the question begs is, why are we here today, right? And Sam's going to give you just a ton of great information about what is happening. But the nuts and bolts of it, which is different than the nuts and bolts that Sam's going to talk about, is that God is working in this place in a magnificent way, right? The staff, the faculty are growing God's Spirit. The fruit of the Spirit abounds in this place. And we literally cannot contain it anymore. That's why we're here today. And the reality is we need to do something about it, right? Families want their children to hear about God and be immersed in it. And they want their children loved like we love them at home. That's why they're coming to this place right now. And so I've heard a lot of talk about this is Sam's project. This is the leadership team project. I want to make one thing abundantly clear to you today. This is not Sam's project. This is not Pastor Carl's project. This is not Brian Maxman's project. This is not Trinity's project. This is not my project. This is not your project. This is God's project. He has called us to this. You know, I like to listen to biblical commentaries. There's a pastor that I love very much. My wife she hears about him all the time. And she's probably sick of hearing about him. But he says, where God leads, he provides for needs. Where God leads, he provides for needs. God has led us to this place. Please, let's give him the opportunity to provide for that need. I want to thank you all for that, and I'm going to give it back to Sam so we can really get into this work.
All right, thanks, Ryan. As I like to start a lot of our meetings with the mission and vision of this place. in all of our children to develop a passion for learning. That learning would be something that's engaging, purposeful, joyful. Should school be fun? Yes. And to develop a heart for Christ, or sometimes when we say around our leadership team, disciples making disciples. We are actively pursuing these things, and we are actively pursuing our vision statement, which is Trinity Lutheran School of Friendship will be the leader, not second, not third, not fourth, the leader in Christian education in the state of Wisconsin by making disciples who make disciples, delivering the highest quality education, maintaining a balanced and diverse student body, and by relentlessly pursuing excellence in the development of our faculty, staff, and support personnel. This is not something we do perfectly or that we can do perfectly because we are all sinful and fall short of God's glory. But it is a target that will always be out in front of us, that we will always chase. All right, let's get into it. Some data and some definitions, and I know you've kind of heard this already, but just so we're really, really clear. The remodel is what's happening right now down that hallway. The remodel is the classroom addition and office additions that are going into the lower level of what used to be the library, and also the lower level of the church, adding 4 office spaces, technically 3 classrooms, a multi-purpose space. No, the library is not going away. The library is being moved. We're evaluating titles and making it even better, and it's getting moved to a different location. In fact, some of the same bookshelves will be in just a different location. So the library, office spaces, multi-purpose space under the church, being fully utilized almost every day of the school year. And then what we're here today to talk about is, or it's sometimes called reutilization or renovation. The expansion project is this potential building project that we're looking at, which would add square footage to the campus. The plans, some of the plans are in the back here on the poster board. We're going to walk through some of them a little bit. Remodel, expansion. Some data. This year, we have 270 students. That's up from 219 last year. Again, that's the number we finished the school year with. Up from 121 in 2018. 42% of our students are minorities, and we have students from 32 zip codes around southeastern Wisconsin. 28% of our students are members at Trinity. That number is going to grow as our school grows, as it already has. And something we'll get into a little bit more here. In the last 2 years alone, 263 students have left Mequon and Thiensville. Now, I didn't get the Germantown data, but that number is also high. Public schools are on an increasingly lower enrollment trajectory over the last decade plus, but it is really, really being felt here in our local district. And by the way, any data I share with you today about Mequon and Thiensville was a part of their commission report that came out in February. I can make that available to you. That link will be on our website as well. So there's just a look at what enrollment has done since 2015. 18-19 represented the lowest enrollment that we had on our recorded history, which was 121. And that decline has really been going for much further than 15-16. It went up a little bit here and there, but it's really been steady. It had been steady since the mid-late 90s. And then, praise God, we can announce today that next year we have registered more than 24 more than the most students this place has ever had in history. We registered our 300th student this last week. So praise God for the growth happening in the school. For 2022 and 2023, we have 60 preschool students currently enrolled. 60. 3.5 years ago, I believe there were 12. That is the future of this school. There are 300 total students enrolled. Next year will mark our 4th consecutive year of growth. 8 out of 11 current grades for next year are either at capacity or have a waiting list. 4 different grades will have at least 2 classrooms. So that starts in 3K, 4K, 5K, and this next year, 1st grade. Every room, including the ones we haven't even built yet, will be full. Some other contextual data from Mequon and Thiensville, I just thought this would be helpful to sprinkle in a little bit. Since 2019, Mequon has averaged 85 new housing units per year. Between 22 and 35, MTSD projects 988 new housing units in Mequon, 250 in Thiensville, and based on an algorithm they use, they estimate 0.6 FTE for students in those households. That's just a rough guess. There is the potential in the next 13 years, just in Mequon, for for 742 new district students. Now, obviously, our reach goes far beyond Mecklenburg-Thiensville, but this is helpful information when people ask, well, there aren't houses going up, or Mecklenburg's mostly a farming community still. Yes and no. There are still many developments happening currently and planned for the future. Again, there's a lot more in that report from the district, but this information is out there available, and it's based on zoning permits requested and a whole bunch of other things. But there's a future in this area of more students. I want to talk a little bit before we get into the project too about our work with Generis. And at this time I'm going to actually invite Steve Whitmer to pop up here real quick. Steve works exclusively with ministries and churches as in his role at Catalyst. So I'm going to let him tell you a little bit about what he does for Catalyst and how Trinity got connected with Generis, and a little bit about Generis' history too. So Steve.
Thank you. So I'm with an arm of Catalyst called Catalyst Ministry Solutions. Essentially what I do is go around and work with churches and schools who are thinking about or entering into a project. One of the things that Catalyst has done and what's different and why Catalyst Ministry Solutions is in place is that we noticed that a lot of times they would get a vision and they'd launch it and then it would stall out. It would sit there for years and years. And we've got some that are sitting there for 6, 7, 8 years before they ever get to, if they do get to that vision of what that project would be. So I'm here to help and use my experience to help get to that point of groundbreaking. Now my experience has been for many years as an executive director for several churches, fast-growing churches that were going through building programs. I was also a consultant that I traveled for several years, going to churches and schools and putting them through fundraising, campaigns, raising money so that they could get their projects. And so when I originally met with Dr. Seefeld was to just simply say, hey, what are you looking at? And let's look at what a timeline would be and what would be involved possibly with fundraising, financing, or leadership teams. How would you set that up? My experience with Generis gave me the opportunity to see, it gave me a glimpse kind of what I used to see as consultants would come in, you'd pay them a lot of money, they'd go out, they'd talk to your people, they would make people feel comfortable, they'd be at these home meetings, they'd ask for a lot of money, and you'd say yes, and then you kick the campaign off, and it goes for 3 years, and eventually you don't quite hit what your goal is. And that's not what a consultant who's actually a coach does at all. What a coach will do is come in and help you understand that when Dr. Seefeld meets with different individuals and talks to them, he's talking to them about the vision of what is going to be what you have for a vision and what's happening now, and why it's important to get involved. And he also, what a coach will do, what Generis is very, very good at, is giving you the information on how to have specific meetings or how to talk to people and what's important, so that you stay on task with the meetings or the different events that you might have. And it's been proven that over and over again, a good consultant, someone who really spends time with that person, will increase the dollars for the project significantly. And so that's what my goal is. I come in and I just help you get to that finish line. And then Eric would take over, and he's on the construction side, and he'll be talking about that in a minute. I'll be around for any questions later too, so if you want to ask any questions, I'd be happy to talk to you. Thanks.
And thanks, Steve. Eric Williams, by the way, is Director of Pre-Construction, correct? Okay, so Eric's actually working with us currently on the renovation project in the lower level, and would also be working with us if this plan were to go forward. So some information from Generis, what they do and what they have done. They are advancement coaching, as Steve said, in preparation. They prepare us to go do the work and the heavy lifting. They also do a wealth analysis and screening process, which is just a tool they have that only looks at public data, so they're not doing any key eye work or anything like that. They just see what's out there and available, and it helps guide our process, guides our asking, things like that. They also develop a campaign, what I like to call the bones of the campaign. So one of the greatest activities that we've done so far is to create a case statement. That case statement will be available on the website starting tomorrow. We'll email the group as well once all that's ready. But the case statement essentially gives you the why behind this project, and then the what it is that it's going to be. Make no mistake, this is not a fluff job. This is not a renovation project that adds more natural light to the building because we feel like that would look cool. It doesn't add a swimming pool because that's honestly not in our strategic plan at all, although that would be cool. But this project is purposeful, and they help us refine that purpose into a concise statement. And again, we'll show you that document later. And again, to be really clear, what they do not do is raise money for us. They will also not come straight out and promise us a certain amount. They can give us an idea and a ballpark, and I'll show you some of those ballparks here soon, but they're not promising us a certain amount of money. The work that we've done with Generis is, I would say, about 3/4 of the way done, and in 3 weeks from now, we should have more or less a final report and a final number that they believe we can hit conservatively. Okay? Here's some comments from the Generis report to date. Generis consultants Kim Jennings and Eric Hamshaw believe Trinity stands in a good position to raise a conservative estimate of $5.5 million. There are several factors leading to this conclusion, and I'll include this report on the website. There's a whole host of reasons why that number is as low as it is. And again, in 3 weeks, that number is going to change, and that number could be as high as 2 to 3 times as much. The church and the board will need to be all in and fully behind the campaign. Momentum and 100% participation will be critical for the strength and to help behind Sam as he runs the project. There is no director of advancement at Trinity. Right now, that's kind of me. While Sam will own the campaign, he must not be the only person carrying it on his shoulders. He will run the campaign, but cannot be the only person acting to make it successful. All in. That's the phrase that you're going to hear a lot coming forward here. The church stands to benefit tremendously from the continued growth of the school and all the families to whom it ministers. The church must have members and attenders or attendees who will provide some of the major giving towards the campaign. And every member of the church needs to be prayerfully committed to giving something to the campaign. The goal of the church members should be no less than 100% participation. We feel that if time is given to strategically cultivate and solicit the top 25 to 50 potential donors, acquire 2 to 3 foundation gifts, and execute well a public phase of the campaign, the potential could be much higher than the $5.5 million, perhaps as much as the $13 million total goal, which actually the number is about 14. And finally, again, these are summative comments from a longer report. The difference between raising a few $1 million and 13 million plus could be as few as 20 inspired and committed givers. So again, we've done some homework with Generis. We have a report ready, but the final report will be out in roughly 3 weeks, and that information will all be made available to you at that point in time. And again, just a reminder, by the way, if you have questions about anything as we go, I don't want to save it all for the end, so if you think of something, you can either write it down and ask it later, or just put your hand up and stuff will find you. The work to date, again, they have developed a case statement that is a rich document. It is really well done. It's been a 2-month process, iteration, back and forth. We really like what we've landed on there. Wealth screening initial results, again, more in 3 weeks. Right now, the conservative estimate is $5.5 to $6.5 million raised, and in a hurry, too, for that matter. They also believe we have the framework for 13 million plus. And again, much unknown, especially from the church side of things. And again, we hope to answer more of those questions in about 3 weeks. So that's been the Generis work to date. I'll give you a little bit more insight on the results of their work with me here in just a moment. With that, I'm going to get into the timelines. A church member approached me not too long ago and said, well, people think you just asked for drawings from growth and they gave you a pretty building. And didn't you guys want to go and do that? It's not quite that simple. There is a very thoughtful process that Growth and their associates take with organizations when they start the process of saying, we believe we have some needs, we're interested in a potential expansion. What does that process look like? So we're going to walk through what we've done to date. Back in January of 21, Growth design begins conceptual work exploring what could be on our campus, including our team's requirements for space, square footage, the number of offices, the number of bathrooms, all that stuff. And in April of 21, they completed that conceptual framework and artwork for campus expansion, and bids were sent out and requested from 3 different construction companies, so that we're not just presenting you with the cheapest or the most expensive plan. Let's get into the nuts and bolts of what work went on over those 3 months. First, a needs assessment. What do you need? Well, we project out in the next couple of years we're going to be full, and we'd minimally like to be able to serve 2 classrooms for each grade. Okay, cool. What about childcare? Well, childcare, in fact, has tripled in size since 3 years ago, and we'd like them to be able to double and triple in size again over the next few years. We'd also like their facilities to be to code, so that in the event we want to participate in the Wisconsin Shares program and be able to accept more families of low income, we can do that. But we have to have rooms of a certain configuration and to a certain code to be able to participate in that program. And if our doors are open to all of God's children all the time, then we ought to go do that. So let's give you some information. In that needs assessment, we essentially ask, what are the project needs? And I can't stress that enough. And then we begin what's called program planning. The documents you see here are an example of a programming questionnaire. In this example, you see kindergarten and you see classroom. There were, I believe, 24 different questionnaires sent in an email attachment to me. My job then was to take those 24 attachments and deliver them to my teammates and to other people connected to Trinity, so that we got back a collection of information to make sure we were just giving growth what we need. Square footage, cabinet storage space, where's space here? Yeah, storage space for kid stuff, bathrooms. We can talk all day about bathrooms here, holy smokes. But what will you need if you're gonna grow? What does that space look like? Nobody's putting hot tub on any of these things, okay? But these questionnaires, this was like a 2-3 week process, and once we were done with those, it becomes part of a program plan. Now this document, as you see, there's different sections here, kind of highlighted by blue. Those sections include kindergarten, early childhood, childcare, offices, field house, locker rooms, bathrooms. A thoughtful process went into examining each of those spaces to arrive at what growth then uses as their program. From there, they get to modeling spaces by the square foot. Okay? Still with me? Once they know the square footage of the total project, we then go into the site feasibility study. Mr. Axman used that phrase quite a bit last year when we talked about a feasibility study. And to do that, we take a look at the property. Where can we build? Where can we not build? What's considered wetlands? What's considered runoff? In this example, what line is the sun taking and how does that affect classrooms? Where could we put buildings? All right? At that point, we then start site mapping and brainstorming. They then came back to, okay, so what's all considered in site mapping and brainstorming? Like, why don't you just stack 5 classrooms on top of the existing building? There's a lot to consider when we talked about where buildings would go. Here's a few examples. Number 1, teams together. Right now, our childcare building is across the parking lot. It is really tough to maintain camaraderie, good communication, and just general healthiness of the work environment when about half of our team is across a parking lot. Every day, our lunch program workers push a hot cart across our parking lot to give food to the childcare house. In winter, ice, the angle of the parking lot, all sorts of weird things. Every day that happens. And every day we go back and forth, whether it's Pastor Carl or Chris doing a children's program over there, or whether it's their representatives coming over here for a meeting. It creates, it's like the longest 200 yards ever. But we want teams together. Right now, until this remodel, Rick Adams and Cindy Mullins had a room in their old computer lab. By the way, we haven't had a computer lab here in 10 plus years, so just to be clear. Rick Adams and Cindy Mullins, that office in the basement. Brian Axman, our CEO, an office in what used to be a storage closet. Steph Herbert, assistant principal, office, which used to be a conference room. People are spread all over the place. Let's get our teams together. Wayfinding and access. If we build a new field house, could we take rentals? Should people that come in for rentals have access to everything else? Well, no. Okay, well, where does that mean that goes then? Our childcare hours are later than the school hours. Childcare opens earlier and closes later than the school. Well, where does it go, and how do we make sure we have secure entries that are, the right doors are locked, the right doors are open, and where does it go and why? So things like access. Are the pastor's offices close to the church, or are they in the back corner somewhere else? Okay? And childcare hours, I think facilities around here, have to do rentals. What happens when we have multiple events going on at the same time? If there's a wedding rehearsal up in the church, or a reception happening in, say, our proposed welcome center, and there's a wrestling tournament in the new field house, what doors are open and how and why? And then, of course, purposeful spaces. Can't tell you enough how much need has driven the design. Remember the questionnaires, the program planning, all of that. Okay? So then we moved from here to a tabletop-sized map of the facility, of the campus. And then Pete Schneider, the architect we've been working with to date, comes with scaled puzzle pieces, I'm calling them. And they represent the different parts of the program. So we said we need X number of classroom space, we need X number of lobby space, we need X number of office space, we need the field house to be this big. So he came with little puzzle pieces that we could move around and manipulate on this map on a table, and that's when we started talking about wayfinding, access, why certain teams would be in certain places, etc. And then we started to move them around. And here are just a few of the configurations. Purple, for just the sake of these ideas here, purple is fellowship hall, that teal is office, childcare is in this color, early childhood, which is kindergarten, preschool is in yellow, and field house is here, and then all this other stuff is just corridor access, orange is a hub. But here's just some of the configurations that we explored. And you notice some of them really interfered with and went deep into the property, which maintaining authenticity might not be the right word, but maintaining some of the historical property was really important to us too. Here's a really fun one. And each one of these, by the way, had a reason for why we didn't go with it. And I'll tell you why this one didn't go. Because when you're driving from Granville South, which is where most of our traffic comes from, we wanted the most important piece of our ministry to stand out ahead of all other things. And that is the historic church on the hill. So we didn't want some big gaudy field house coming before it. That's also why we added those entrance signs perpendicular a few years back. But each one of these was vetted with the team, and we arrived at this. We're going to walk through this program here in just a moment. But essentially what this is, offices and fellowship area, welcome center as we're calling it, all the classrooms in a 2-story addition, and then the field house with a separate lobby and access point over there. Why don't you build on top of the buildings? It's one of the most inefficient cost mechanisms you can possibly have. Robert can probably talk more about this. The historic nature of the building, the fact that none of the current building is sprinklered, talking about building on top creates all sorts of need for the existing building to be to fire code. Drove costs way up, and then we got into obviously aesthetics and other things and access, but 2-story addition puts all the classrooms in one succinct place. So here's the project. That's a view of the campus in the current model. Now, this won't be the final version of it, but it's with the existing, based on the needs we provided, the square footage to the square foot. This is what one rendering looks like. View from Granville, again, historic church is the most prominent piece. Architects will tell you that glass is a great transition to modern buildings or new buildings. You gotta use the historic school brick. We want it to look like it's been here for a while as much as we can, but we want it to match and look good with the existing brick of the schoolhouse. In fact, that brick isn't really made anymore, and the bricks that are out on the signs on the road had to be custom ordered, because our team who was on the sign committee was insistent upon preserving as much history of the place as we could. So this is all specific brick. What you have here is the same driveway, a canopy entrance here. Notably, the White House is gone. Brian can talk more about the properties we manage and maintain here, but this is ADA access and parking for parents with younger children. This is one level access to the main building and one level access to the historic church in this configuration. This lobby area here is divided into two entrances, so you have access to childcare, which is the lower level of the main classroom building, and access to the rest of the school. There's an idea of what it does to the entire property. So as you see, it doesn't interfere with the existing childcare house here, making transition time pretty feasible. And here's just an example, a 3D rendering. This is before the fine tuning, but just to give you a little bit of an idea. It does obviously create a lobby, or a courtyard in the middle. I'm going to keep going here, just in the interest of time. So there's a view from parking lot level of the lobby area. One of the cool architectural pieces, which we didn't even ask for, but growth threw in, is we want to tie in the historic elements of the church, which they use, the archways of the gathering room and the sanctuary, with a small extension over here, and then you'll see it again later down by the athletics area. Main lobby area. And why is the lobby area so big? Why do you need that space? If you've ever been here for a half-day pickup of our preschool kids and hung out in the lobby area, especially in winter or when it's raining, you know why it's big. And by the way, we're going to be twice as big as we are in the preschool next year. One view of the A version of the canopy entrance. Courtyard, no play equipment, no plastic stuff. We want it to stay as natural as possible. Because of the grade of the property, we actually create a natural outdoor amphitheater here, which we will be able to have Bible studies, classes, etc. But no additional fake toys, more or less. Keep it pretty. Here's a view from the west looking east, as again you see the grade of the property going down this way. And then again, a modest little architectural feature here that kind of tie it in, but also to designate this area as the athletics side of the house. In a separate small lobby that's going to have concessions, locker rooms, bathrooms, etc., so we can rent the facility out. Athletics courtyard area. And this is a rendering of the inside of the field house area. These doors up here are actually same level access to the hallway that's over here. Current middle school, and then down the road, the 2 third graders and 2 fourth grade rooms. And then again, here's the overview from the southeast. So, back to the timeline. Once all that stuff was completed in April of 21, our enrollment in August hit 270, and we began exploring options of temporary classrooms. Growth in catalysts came back pretty quickly, and the cost of trailers became astronomical. We're going to be spending, depending on the number of classrooms we want to add, between $350,000 and $750,000 on temporary trailers if we were to add them to the western edge of the parking lot. It's an option, but it's expensive. August 22nd and 29th, we held town halls in here to show people the progress of the design piece. October of 21, our first annual school gala came in, and we netted $140,000. That is paying for the renovation that is happening currently, and it also purchased our piano lab. Fine arts is booming here, and if you haven't been aware, we started a strings program in the fourth quarter here. We have 14 students taking string lessons, violin, cello, viola, at Trinity. So with the piano lab edition, group piano lessons, grades 3 on up, fine arts is really taken off here, and we've just kind of more or less confirmed a second theater production next school year as well. In December of 21, the endowment committee supported a partnership with advancement consulting firm Generis. A 5-month contract was signed. In January, we took 3 bids for the remodeling project, and the contract was awarded to Catalyst. And here we are in March, on 3/7, so March 7th, last month, the quiet phase of fundraising began. What does that mean? You don't have a campaign going. That's correct. But I've started to engage, based on all my homework with Generis and all the skills they've been working with me on, started to have some conversations with some people. If this project goes, what would you be interested in committing? And I'll talk a little bit about what that number is at, or where that number is in just a little bit. March 13th, the Board Way Leaders commissioned the Expansion Communication Committee, and you are here April 3rd for a community meeting about the future of this place. And we're gonna walk through project, I'm gonna skip this part of the timeline for a reason here, but I'm gonna hand this over to Mr. Axman to talk about everybody's favorite topic, money, as we go through here.
You can just do it. I don't know any Bible verses about bathrooms, but it preoccupies a lot of our time because we have the same bathroom facilities that we had in the 50s. And when you go from 120 kids up to 300 for next year with the same amount of bathrooms, you can imagine that creates some issues. How many of you have ever thought about money or been concerned about money or wondered what something would cost before you would purchase something? Just out of curiosity. Oh good, so we're all on the same page. Unfortunately, money is kind of where the road leads on everything in our lives, right? We talk about how much things are going to cost, what are the investments. When we look at a project like this, it's important to consider everything that goes into a project. You look at what it costs to build it, you look at what your capacity is going to be and what kind of income you're going to generate from it. You look at what are the ongoing maintenance costs, what are the ongoing insurance costs, what are some of the things that you're going to add that you haven't even thought about. More elevators mean more elevator maintenance every year, more checks and balances. A sprinkler system means more testing of that. There's lots of things that go into it. So as you throw all of this into the bucket and you start looking at adding square feet, you try to figure out projections for what that's going to cost. So go ahead to the next slide. So as we were kind of going through Sam's assessment that he got back with all of the needs and things like that, we tried to figure out 3 good options that could be either phased or could be our initial look at what we're going to build. Option 1, and you see the range up there, is completing the Welcome Center, the office suite, all the classrooms, and the child care wing, but not doing anything with that field house, kind of leaving that off for a future project. Option 2 was completing the Welcome Center, the office suite, the classrooms, the child care wing, and that field house. So kind of the everything at once approach, which overall per square foot becomes the most efficient and economical. And then option 3 was kind of a hybrid approach that we thought, let's have something in between. And this would be the ability to build the full shell of everything, but only complete the Welcome Center, the offices, and about half of the rooms, and then as needed, as we were growing, as we were bringing in more kids and more activities and more programs, we could finish off those rooms individually on an as-needed basis. Far less efficient, but it gives you a different option to start off with. So then the other thing we have to look at is when you consider a project like this, you have a combination of your fundraising, actual donations, you have pledges that people commit to over a 3-year or a 5-year period, and then, of course, you would have debt service. If you don't have enough of the first 2 categories, you'd have to get a loan. So as we look at potential loans, what I did is I just did some quick market research. We haven't been approved for anything or not even applied for anything because constitutionally, only you can have us do that. But in general, right now, commercial rates, things for schools and nonprofits, are in the 3.625% rate. That's a 20-year amortization loan, but you have to refinance it every 10 years, so the rate could change. And I just gave you 5 categories, just to give you an idea of what kind of nut we're looking at securing here on a monthly basis. So on the low end, if we did a $2.5 million loan, we're looking at just over $14,000 a month in servicing that mortgage. If we went all the way up to $7 million, you can see that's $41,000 a month. It's important to consider that because that's a budgeted thing that you have to tackle every single month. Right now, this congregation has no debt. So we don't have any of the debt service that we have to pay for out of our budget. So doing this is your starting point for what are we going to agree to, and then you have all the operational costs on top of that. Okay, so with these 3 scenarios that we laid out, that first one, we're assuming a total cost of around $9.5 million, and any of you that have ever built anything or been involved with that, you know there's overruns, you know there's unexpected things that are going to come up. So that's really kind of the floor. If we were able to receive donations and pledges in the ballpark of around 5 million, again, being conservative based on what Sam's report from Generis indicated, that would give us that debt service of 4.5 million. Option 2, looking at that cost, looking at raising a little bit more in donations and pledges and raising our debt service to 5.5 million. And then option 3, the 10.7 million with the total donations and pledges at 6.2, back to that 4.5 million. The reason that we do this, and that next slide, this isn't important to be able to read this right now, but let me explain to you the process. We do all of those scenarios because we start to look at, okay, how is our childcare income going to increase over a 5-year period? What about our tuition revenue? What about choice voucher, SNSP? How about rental income? We start to plug these numbers in based on formulas on current numbers to kind of look at how would this kind of expansion affect our income side of the balance sheet. And then of course we have to take into account on the expense side, well, how many teachers do you have to raise? What are your capacity issues? And as we start to look at this and we start to map this out, we plug things in and take things out, what I can provide you with as we go further along the process is, when does this become something that we've got the cost covered? Does it take 2 years? Does it take 4 years? What is the capacity we have to be at in order to make sure we're paying for everything that we're committing to? These numbers give you what's called a break even. Okay, we know how many students in the child care, we know how many students in the school, we know how many teachers we're going to have, we know what our debt service is. So can you scroll down a little bit? Oh, okay. So, no, go back. So on this one, if you look, you start off in the red. If we do all this and we use all these scenarios, year one, when we're at 63.6% capacity with our estimates, we're in the red and we have to service our debt. And so as you continue to go each year and you add more kids and you add more staff and you add more expenses for utilities and insurance and repairs and upkeep and all that kind of stuff, you start to get to the point where in most of those scenarios that we looked at, depending on how much money we raise and how much money we would borrow, somewhere around year 3 or year 4 on a more expensive project, we actually hit our break-even numbers. Now, what can affect that is if our conservative approach to enrollment, so in year 1, I only have 50 new kids coming in, and that's probably pretty low. It'll probably be significantly higher than that. But as we look at that, and we look at tuition costs, and we look at choice revenue, these are all things that we don't know what they're going to be. So we use conservative numbers on the income, and we use very aggressive numbers on the expenses, so that we don't end up with a big surprise. So my mentality with money is to kind of build out the worst case scenario so that if you guys are shocked with what we're doing, you're shocked on the positive side, not the negative side. That's kind of how I've been doing it for 30 years and it's worked pretty well. So again, just a basic crisscross chart. If we tackle a project and we start fundraising, you guys are going to be the ones to decide how much debt are we willing to do. Because it doesn't matter which of those options we pick. If the congregation says, I'm not willing to go above this level of debt, then we either have to make the difference up with cash donations and pledges, or we have to scale the project back. So you're in control of what that is. But this gives you an idea that as donations and pledges go up, the debt goes down. And we've already talked about as leadership and with the expansion and communication committee that our goal would be to retire whatever debt we sign on to retire that quickly. So we build this, we bring in more students, we increase our income, we possibly have rental, we have childcare, all that kind of stuff. Any money that we're pushing to the bottom line is going to go to retire the debt quicker. In addition, we probably would look at another capital campaign, pursuing more foundations and grant locations, because we don't want to carry this debt for 20 years or longer. We want to retire that quickly so that we can continue to use our funds coming in for more ministry and things like that. I know I threw a lot at you, but are there any questions related to that, the process? So again, on Sam's end and with his team, kind of identifying the needs, on my end, trying to figure out, well, not only what's it going to cost us to build this, but what about maintaining it? Because you're going to need more maintenance people, you're going to need more cleaning crews, you're going to have higher utilities, higher insurance, all the things that go into that building. It's not a direct wash. And so we have to figure out on an ongoing basis that, yeah, if we start generating $1.5 million more in income from tuition and childcare and rental and all these great things. And we have, we're near capacity at 90%, and we can put 530 kids in that new school. That's great. But we're also spending $1.2 million on benefits, salaries, insurance, maintenance, repairs, upkeep, all that kind of stuff. So making sure that we take all of that into account, just like you all would do in your private lives, is an important process here. And if this would ever come to a vote, you would be able to look at how those projections would look over a 5-year, over a 10-year, over a 15-year period, with all of our estimates put in there, so that it gives you a good idea of not just what are we spending to build something, but what are we spending to maintain it and keep it going into the long haul. So that's the process, yes.
Could you explain what the choice money actually covers? What expenses choice money covers?
Yeah, so at our last analysis, it costs here at Trinity about $10,450 per student to educate them right now. That number is down. We've become much more efficient as we've grown. Choice income is around $8,700 a year. So there's a little bit of a gap there. And that gap, both with tuition and choice, is offset by other income sources as well as giving from the congregation. Giving from the congregation 10 years ago was probably 70% of our budget. Giving from the congregation now, because of all these other things, is down to around 31% of our budget. So that's a positive move in generating income in other areas.
How can that money be used? I mean, is it used for only hiring teachers, like for wages?
No, anything that comes in from choice or from SNSP, which is the special needs program, has to be used directly for education purposes. And when we get audited 5 times a year now, that's what they check on. They make sure that every dollar that comes in from choice is used for education. That's maintenance, that's technology, that's benefits, that's salaries, that's curriculum, that's anything that's specific to the school. We couldn't buy Pastor Carl a Lamborghini. That wouldn't fly with choice. In case that's where you were going, Pat, we can't do that. You can do that privately, but we can't. Any other financial questions? Yes, sir.
Brian, we've had a septic problem situation here, and we're at well. Have you gotten any data from Mequon Kingsville in regards to possible sewer water? Because if you build that field house, even if you don't build a field house, you had mentioned bathroom facilities, etc. When I was involved in a building program in public schools, we had to go with Sussex at that time to extend the sewer and water to the school district because it was impossible to do the present septic system that we had, etc. We've got a problem here with both those. How does that affect costing and possible expansion?
Yeah, that's a great question, Dennis, and it has been part of our discussion. One of the things is the city has indicated that there are future plans to possibly bring water and sewer out down Granville. There's no specific date. In order to do this project, that has to be part of the analysis, because it's not just enough septic and enough well water, but you have a sprinkler system in this expanded thing by rule and by ordinance, and enough pressure and water available for that is a significant issue. So right now, Trinity is considered a public water utility, and so we have to go through the DNR testing on a quarterly basis with all of our wells and our septics. There's no way this project can proceed forward until our team and the city of Mequon figure out exactly what would be involved with that. So, I mean, we don't know the answer to that question yet. Do you guys have anything to offer to that yet? No. I know it's been discussed, but it hasn't.
It's been discussed,
yeah.
As far as it's going.
But that's going to be a huge obstacle and roadblock for us to figure out, because it's going to be critical to that building.
Pre-construction work on a project like this is anywhere between $250,000 and $500,000. We do not have the authorization of the church at this point to proceed with this project, therefore we have not authorized any kind of pre-construction work, and it's at that time that the plan for how we're going to take care of well and septic will come out. They have started some initial homework on that topic already. In fact, one of our board members, I don't know, is Drew here?
Yep, I'm here.
Drew's here. Drew's already been in touch with both the architect and the construction firm, seeking some of those answers already. Again, we won't know some of that until we pull the trigger on pre-construction work, which is a substantial investment to the detailed blueprints. These are just the pretty designs, but that's at the point when the team gets together and says, all right, we're exploring the mound system, we're exploring X number of new septic lines, whatever the case may be, but that's 2 steps down the road yet.
Any other questions about the financial process? Yes, sir.
Not the financial, but what is the goal of height, or how many do you want to build the school for with the new addition?
Yeah, so when we look at the numbers, and Sam mentioned 2 classrooms for each level, and then capping the classrooms based on whether they're preschool, childcare, or the upper grades, the total capacity with this expansion would be 530 total kids. We're showing in my soft kind of projections being at around 88 to 90% capacity after year 5. That could be way off. We've seen the last 4 years have grown at a significantly faster rate than that. So 530 is about where we would be with that, give or take. Yes?
Hi, what kind of monies could be generated from field house rentals?
Yeah, so we've looked into that a little bit with some of the other schools in the area. It's not a ton of money, but it's probably between $20,000 and $35,000 a year, where you get a sports team that might want to rent it for practice. You can host some tournaments where there's entry fees and things like that. Living Word up in Jackson does that significantly. First Emmanuel in Cedarburg does that as well. There's a lot of opportunity that we get now where they ask to use this gym and we turn it down because we don't have the resources and the staff to take care of that. So if we were to build this field house, that would almost become a little bit of a separate business venture to have somebody managing that, taking the rental, making sure the insurance is up to date, the access that Sam talked about, things like that. But it could be a good income stream for us to be able to use that. Other questions for me? Yes?
What's maybe I do. Okay, so if we got $250,000 invested, that's for facilities, we said go ahead with the project, but then they find that we can't go forward, that's lost money and we should stop. If we don't have the capacity with the sewer or water, after we've authorized the expansion in a big project, we could be held $250,000 because we found we couldn't.
Yeah, when you do the pre-construction research and homework and all the engineering and things like that, there's always the possibility that you run into a roadblock that somebody at the city level or the state level or municipal sewer or whatever comes in and says, you can't do this, we'd have to find an alternative. The likelihood of it being completely shut down and stopped is pretty low. But we would just have to figure out another solution, holding tanks, some other sort of process of doing that.
I would just say that throughout the design process, our contract is also very phased. So if early on something like that is discovered and the project is indefinitely put on hold, you're only liable, you're only on the hook for the portion of the work in that phase that we've done. Both parties have the ability to terminate that contract.
There was another question back there.
Yeah, I was talking with road design people in the past, and just some numbers talking off the record with the city. With other projects in the area, talking about sanitary sewer, that's a public sewer. Right now, let's just say the prices are about $600 a foot to get here and we're over a mile away, I think, from our nearest manhole. And I don't know how that would include a lift station. I'm not an engineer, nor do I play one on TV. But also other schools in the area, public schools, that what they've gone to, maybe in Washington County, for example, is when they're outside the public utility, they try to go to a mound system. A lot of times the mound system is way more efficient than a holding tank. With the county, with the work that I've done with the Ozaukee County, they say that when you have a holding tank, you need to have enough capacity for so many days. For example, you need a capacity of 5 days. If you think you need to be pumped more than once in that 5 days, you need to have the capability of having 24-hour pumping or dumping at a local municipal plant or something like that. So either way, off the record prices was $600 a foot, which is a lot, but not right in the plant up in that one to be here tomorrow, but also like a mound system in the area.
maybe even a double nozzle system, they were talking $250,000 or something to get something up to date and things like that. So other things to look into. Other things that we looked into too is talking about stormwater or a stormwater retention plan, which is huge. Good luck with MMSD. I struggled to figure out what the secrets are with Chapter 13. It's going to be a big deal, but nothing we can't overcome.
Yeah, and because I mentioned before, I think to Dennis, because Trinity is classified as a public water utility, all that means is that there's some oversight from the DNR, and the quarterly testing that we go through, they rate our wells in terms of how deep they are and how fast the water flows to how many people you can serve. So once we get to the pre-engineering and the pre-construction stage, and we would present the DNR in addition to MEC1 with this idea that here's a facility that 530 capacity for kids, maybe 65 capacity for staff, and if we're doing something in the field house, you know, maybe on a weekend we're going to have 1,000 people here. Whatever, I'm just using round numbers. The DNR is going to come back and they're going to say, okay, the issue is the well isn't rated for that kind of capacity. You might have to add another well, you might have to change your well pump, you might have to go deep. There's any number of things the DNR can come back, but the fact is they can do that right now. So when they come in and they test us every quarter, they rate the quality of the water, they rate the speed of the water, and they can come back to us and say you need to upgrade equipment. So that's going to be all part of what we're going to talk about if and when we get to that point. Other questions for me? Yes, sir.
What happens when the choice program goes away?
Yeah, that's a question. That's a risk. You know, we look at, Sam and I talk a lot about looking at enrollment going down the road and what if another school opens up? What if something drastically changes in the public school? What if choice goes away? These are all risks that we can mitigate, but we can't eliminate. That's a great question. I don't have an answer for that. I mean, it appears that the choice numbers have grown so much over the years since it started that it's getting harder and harder and harder to see any scenario where that would go away because it's touching more and more people. So you want to address that?
So a recent Marquette University law poll came out and found 65% of Wisconsinites supported the choice program. As Brian mentioned, it's getting harder and harder, even as an inner city representative, to vote no on choice items. In fact, just in February here, the legislature and the Senate sent Tony Evers a bill. He has not done anything with it yet, but along with the Parental Bill of Rights, sent him a bill to make choice universal in the state. So there's legislation already drafted to get rid of income limits, get rid of caps, and just make choice wide open in the state. I live in Menominee Falls. I've got 2 kids of school age. They're each assigned $8,300 to their name per state statute. If I pay private tuition at a school, that's $1,600 and $600 goes right back to DPI. Universal choice, which is by far the most parent-centric approach, gives me the right as their parent to direct where that $8,300 goes. That bill is already on the governor's desk. That's how fast and how great choice is advancing in this state. So even if Governor Evers declines that and vetoes that, the moment a Rebecca Clayfish or a Kevin Nicholson get into office, that legislation is ready for them. That could improve our revenue potentially by 33 to 50%. So the conversation is about what happens if it goes away. It's what are we going to do when it blows up? Because it's heading that way. And the data just keeps showing the increase of it. And it's starting to get modeled in other places. Believe it or not, Illinois is one of them. So it's in really, really good shape.
One more point I'll make to your question too. Just because the last 4 years we've seen this monumental rise in enrollment, we don't ever sit around and say, okay, our work is done. Every year, the registration process, the enrollment process, what are we going to offer next year? It's always a rejuvenated discussion because we have to keep kind of fighting for growth and all that kind of stuff. So whatever gets thrown at us, we're going to have to figure out how to deal with that as a congregation, as a leadership team, as a staff. Those are all really areas of concern that we have to think about a lot. So thank you for bringing that up. Anything else on the financial side? Okay.
As we wrap this up, I want to present you with an ambitious timeline. What Ryan said in the beginning is true. We've got to do something now. Not a year from now, not 3 years from now. We've got to do something now. Those 34, 36 first graders in 23, 24 will be 36 plus second graders. Out of 120 some odd students, or sorry, that's more than that, out of almost 200 students in grades K through 8, for next year, we're losing one student. That's a 99+% retention rate. Our school is growing so rapidly and in such a positive direction, it is just so clear that the time to act is now. If we don't do something now, those 36 first graders will not have a classroom to go to next fall. That is the choice before us. Something has got to be done. It doesn't have to be this. This is the plan our leadership team has put in front of the church. I'm going to go a trailer route, I'm going to go a different route, that's fine. You guys have called, God has called us here through your vote and through your direction for us to give you what we think is the best path forward. And God has been just so good to bring some wonderful people into our lives and into this process to guide them so that it's efficient, thoughtful, and despite the big price tag, it's as affordable as we can get in this market. For our kids, for our future. If you were here at 9:15, you heard Brad Ellis talk about CRT and all the other things going on in public schools right now. It's awful. The diversity numbers at this school, unfortunately, are going down because the most kids coming to our school right now are from just down the street, Mequon, Thiensville, and Germantown, because parents are finally waking up to what's being taught in those places. You will always have a boys and girls bathroom at Trinity. You will always have library books with content that's age appropriate. We will always talk about the sanctity of marriage and of life. Parents want that, and they are screaming for that, and they are showing us that with their income, with their tuition bills. Now is a wonderful time to act. 1839, this place is founded, free city, place for folks to practice what they believe freely without fear of oppression. It's 2022. And parents are wanting a place to practice their religion freely, without fear of oppression, without fear of indoctrination, without fear that kid down the hall is going to walk into the bathroom that they're not supposed to walk into. That's never going to happen here. We've got a chance to be the free city again. We want ambitious? Here's ambitious. We call for a voters meeting in the next couple months. And you've got all the information you need right now. You're going to have even more in 3 weeks with a final Generis report. We make a big public pledge event in June. Pre-construction work, Catalyst has told us, is 3 to 4 months. We break ground on the first day of school in the fall. And we move into a building ready to house 500 plus kids in the fall of 23. People of God, in the quiet phase of our fundraising efforts to date, I have asked 4 families for gifts. And we already have, from 4 families, pledged $2 million. 3 of those families are just from our school. Don't go to church here. That's how much they believe in this. 4 families, $2 million. Let's see what God can do. Let's see where He will take this place. Because it's really exciting right now. With that, I will take any questions for the gentleman here, our pre-construction director, Eric, representative from Growth, Steve on the ministry side of things, Ryan, chair of the expansion committee. Take questions.
Just a quick question. What about this space? Where is this going to become?
Well, right now, about a third of it is used for cafeteria eating, and very likely that's going to continue if the school grows and will bump out into here. The new field house will let us practice 2 teams at the same time, but if we move to 2+ theater events per school year, we want to give this stage and the theater department proper space. So this will stay a lunchroom, it'll stay a multi-purpose room, but we'll give a lot of deference to Mr. Tarr in the theater department as they work diligently to put on our 2 productions a year. Good question.
Has there been any thought to how the congregation can use the school building for like funerals, reunions? Right now, I know it's really hard to have a big funeral here, election.
Yeah, and so the expansion gives us a lot of flexibility there. Just a few ideas right off the top of our head. The current plan does not have this, but we've talked about on this edge of the field house adding a fly system in another stage. So that could become a modern worship facility, potentially. This lobby here, Carl has occasionally referred to this as a church living room. We want this place to be welcoming, have like seating, almost like cafe-type seating areas, Bible studies, meetups from women's groups, etc. That space actually can be pretty large. An initial greeting or almost a visitation, or potentially wedding rehearsal parties, etc. That's a great space to do that before you move into the historic church. It opens up what is right now a lot of cramped space. And if you have a funeral luncheon here, because it's connected to the new field house, you just move all the kids down the hall to the field house for lunch. And it really opens up the ability for the church to make better use of space as they see fit. Oh yeah, in the center courtyard, the courtyard area designed the way it is. We push our kids to be outside as much as possible already in the school day. Having lessons out there, having Bible study out there, having like an evening outdoor worship out there, that'd be really cool. But you can do a bunch of stuff with it, and it's in a secure space too. It's coming.
In regard to, is that on? In regard to the expansion that's going on right now. In regard to the expansion that's going on right now.
Renovation?
Yeah, okay.
Definitions.
Yeah, it is not expansion, right?
Renovation.
In my mind it is, because it's moving other things out and moving that in. Anyhow. If this were to come to pass, and we got all that that's there, how would then this renovation be converted or reused or for our congregation?
That's a great question. Thank you for asking that. I want to go back to the overview shot here in just a second. A smaller one. We have a 5 and 10-year strategic plan as a school, and that includes a whole number of things. One of the things that I'm extremely passionate about, that our team is really united on, is special education. I don't have the room-by-room picture here, but this is the gathering room doors right here, and this is where the canopy is currently. And as you walk in, there's the 3K, 5K, and 4K rooms right here, that little L. You kind of know what I'm talking about. All 3 of those rooms will immediately become dedicated special education rooms. And in our 5-year vision, we want to start a 1 to 2 Down syndrome program for students here. It has broken my heart personally for relationships I've had to welcome families into our door who have a student with Down syndrome who we can't serve. Why not? There's programs that exist, and there are programs in Lutheran schools that exist to serve those kids. Let's do it here. I'm so tired of watching schools send kids on a bus in the middle of the day to go get services at a public school district from people who do not share our values. And we're going to change that. We're changing it already right now. Those 3 rooms, dedicated special education. The rooms down here, workspace, creative space, maker space. Our theater department right now has the stage here to build sets. You see some backdrops being painted over here. We need space for our kids to be creative. We've seen classrooms with 3D printers, classrooms with dedicated art space. The new rooms over here will have multiple sinks, so we can do that kind of stuff. There's all sorts of places we can go with these 2 rooms. We could have breakout study rooms, so we've got the lab science room here, but if we break out into small groups, those rooms aren't going to be terribly large, but we could break out into small groups into different rooms for studying or for group work. There's all sorts of directions we could go. But I can tell you one thing for sure, that those 3 rooms right here, we're gonna move forward with special education now.
How about storage?
Storage, yes, good question. Lori asked about storage. So what the plan doesn't show you, and what our friends at Catalyst have said, or at Growth rather, the design is going to show you classrooms. They're not going to necessarily show you where every pipe and outlet and bathroom or cabinet is going to go. But all of that is rolled into the more fine details of a greater project. So for example, when you look at the, I think one poster by Rick Adams back there has got the room by room breakout, you're not going to see the janitor closet, the storage closet, etc. But they're there. On this lower level of this childcare area, they've got several rooms built out for large motor skills in storage or miscellaneous use. The second floor of the lobby here, we've got as conference space and multi-purpose. So we factored in for, in the programming side of it, we factored in for storage. Good question. Stream. You're the wrong, is it dead? Okay.
That's good. So, simple question.
Just 1 second.
Thank you.
Oh, project.
All right.
I'll try.
As a
I can walk this one back. I don't want anybody to shout here.
As a graduate of Trinity, as a former Lutheran school teacher, as someone who still highly values Lutheran education, it's exciting to see what's happening at the school and to hear about the good things and hear about the growth. For probably much of my life, Trinity has struggled through various challenges, and it hasn't always been a popular destination or place to be. With that said, I think there's a step being skipped in all of this that assumes that an expanded school is the only way for God's Word to be shared at Trinity. And I think the step that's being skipped, or at least that I'm not aware of happening, is for a serious conversation among the Church of Trinity and the leadership to decide, is this the direction that Trinity wants to be all in on? And there are certainly many positive things, but it's not the only option that can or should be considered. There's a lot of people, when I look back at my teaching days, if I look at the students in those yearbooks, I know many of them haven't remained faithful. When I look at students I went to school with here, when you talk to people that teach in other places, there is no guarantee that just because they come here and hear God's Word, that we have made disciples. A huge part of it has to be church. In fact, the church is the institution that God has put in place, not the school. The church has been, is, will continue to be a ministry of the church. But I think there has to be a discussion about, is a larger school the way that Trinity can and should proceed with the investment and all of that. I'm not aware of that conversation happening. But there's a lot of other options that could happen that can share ministry. We could hire additional pastors to have additional Bible studies to we could have an emphasis on more ministry for seniors and do more things. We can, there's all kinds of options that can happen. One of the specific parts that concerns me is that there's an imbalance between the church and the school. We don't have a congregation that can support the school when there's changes about staffing or, laws, or when Steensville School District changes from, bad to maybe better, or, different things that change. One of the things that if we build for this, and we're already at only 28%, according to the statistics that were up there, 28% of the students are members at Trinity, and you don't have to be a member at Trinity to be a great person or God's child, but there becomes an imbalance where that school isn't necessarily still Trinity, and it becomes something else. There are lots of schools who have used choice and have become big schools with no church, and they disconnect. And that's a legitimate danger that has to be discussed. And I just don't think that this should be presented as the only option, or as was referred to, and it made me cringe, as this is God's plan. I don't think you can say that, because there's a lot of ways that we can serve. There are lots of ministries that can happen. It doesn't all have to be through the school. It doesn't all have to take a $12 million project. And I think that discussion has to make sure that Trinity remains who it is. 28% of that school being member students is shockingly low. I mean, if you think of, you can have a family vacation and you can take along one of your kids' friends and it's still a family vacation. But if you take along their whole soccer team, it's no longer a family-focused vacation. And I'm not saying that Trinity should be closed to non-members at all. I don't think that would be appropriate. I think there is a place for outreach. But we can't assume that investing in a school that's twice the size is the only way for Trinity's church to reach out in ministry. And I think we have to be careful as a leadership team, as people on this committee, as a congregation, to not allow that assumption to drive the decisions that get made.
Thanks, Kevin. I'm going to turn it over to Ron here for a second. But let me start by saying there's not a single person here who said the school is the only arm of ministry.
Sorry, almost dropped it. I feel passionate to speak about this one. I want to point out that, there's a lot of ways to seek God's guidance for our congregation, for our school, and for ourselves individually. And I think there's a lot of people here today that can speak to those things that come up in our lives that God presents an opportunity for them. And when God presents an opportunity for you, that's God's mission for you. Okay? And I love the idea of all these ideas that our church can expand, our church can do all these things. They absolutely can. We absolutely can. I too am a product of this place. And I will admit, I didn't graduate from here, but I spent a very good portion of my childhood here, engrossed in this place. I too am a product of this place. And some of us don't come out the other side still engulfed with our faith intact. Right? But right now, what God has placed in front of us is an opportunity. I'm sorry, but I don't see seniors breaking our doors down to get in, saying, I need a Bible study. I don't see members who are complaining that there's not an opportunity for them. This place, my wife and I came here, and our faith has been enriched by this place. That's thank you to the church. But on a daily basis, my children's lives are enriched by their faith because of the school. And too often, I hear language where there's the church and there's the school. No. This is God's family. We are a church and we are a school. And God's mission has been presented to us in the babes that walk these halls. Let's take advantage of that opportunity. Did I go too far? Let's not ignore that fact. Right? I mean, God hasn't presented us for an opportunity for, I don't know, for animal outreach. God hasn't presented us for an opportunity for I don't know, some other ministry. He's presented us with more kids than we can handle. And to act as like that's not, to act as though that's not happening, that's dangerous. Now, I don't want to speak for the leadership team. I'm not the entirety of the leadership team by any means. I'm just a small little portion. As a member of the BLL, and I've only been a member of the BLL for a short little while. So by no means, I'm not going to speak for Chris in the back. I'm not going to speak for our elders, Drew, or anyone else. I'm not going to speak for the entirety of the BLM. But conversations are happening. I promise you, conversations are happening. The BLL meets on a very regular basis. Your board of lay leaders, the people that you selected to be on your board of lay leaders, they meet very regularly and have these conversations. And most certainly, if the congregation would like to attend those meetings, I'm sure we can figure out a way to do that, but those conversations are happening. Dr. Seafeld, Pastor Carl, Pastor Chris, they're meeting, they're discussing, they're having these conversations. And certainly, to some degree, in an organization, the leadership has to take a leading role. And they have to present opportunities to the members of the organization, and that's what we're doing. So please, let's look at the opportunity in front of us. Let's find a responsible way forward. No one on the committee, and no one on the board of lay leaders, no one on the leadership team is suggesting that if this doesn't come to fruition, that we just plow through and do it anyways. We need all of you. Certainly, we can't even proceed without a vote. So, keep your hearts and your minds open to this. What God's waiting from you.
I just had a quick question. The point was raised that the percentage of students who are actually members of the church is really low. How does that actually compare to other Lutheran schools and congregations in the area? I think it was it 28% or 24%?
The number here is 28%.
Right. How does that compare to other Lutheran grade schools in the area?
I don't have data for like the district, but generally the average I hear is about 25%.
So it's pretty on par with. Okay, thanks.
Okay, a couple. I'm going to take some things quickly. Use the other mic. Thank you. Okay, just a couple things quickly. One, Kevin, I appreciate what you said, and I've said it. Looked him in the eye and said, "You are not discipling the kids if you're not discipling the parents." That's something we have to solve. And when we think about what we're going to do as a ministry, and if we're going to build this, my challenge to our community is to say, we need to be the community that will disciple the parents. And so don't just vote for this and write a check and be done with it, but look for the opportunities to help the families discover what it means to be a family in Christ, so that we're discipling the kids, not just teaching them. And to that end, in a couple of weeks, we're going to start a family Bible study here that's being advertised to school families, because we want to understand how that happens and how God created that to happen through the institution that you highlighted that makes disciples, and that's the church. Second thing I'm going to say is, my devotion this morning, I was reading Jesus' temptation in the wilderness, and many of you will remember that the devil picks on him when he's hungry. I haven't eaten since 6:30. So I'm going to just suggest that we set up a forum for debate, because we've gone from information to debate, and that maybe we'll be a little better equipped to have that conversation really in a healthy way if we've all eaten. In any case, I will also just commend the conversation so far. I appreciate it very much, and the way that our congregation is handling this. This is exciting for me to see.
Yeah, and as Ryan and I have talked, we are interested in another meeting and another time after the Palm Sunday Easter season has passed. So we're targeting, I think it's April 24th-ish, potentially, but we're looking for an opportunity very soon to have another discussion about this and maybe even more questions. Anything else? Questions yet?
I was just going to add one comment. Like Ryan, I'm also a member of the BLL, also serving on the Expansion and Communication Committee. We were very intentional in calling it a communication committee as well, because this is a pinnacle moment. Whether we go forward or not, we have to do it as a full church, a full body. Just like the Generis report said, we're going to need 100% buy-in. Either, whether that's financial, whether that's with prayer. We do not want to make this decision and have people feel that they're not being heard. So please, if you have opinions on this, definitely reach out to any of us on the committee. There is an email address on the website. You can reach us that way. I know a number of us we'll go to your homes, we'll meet you for coffee, whatever works so that we can hear you out and also make sure that your input is being shared throughout this whole process. That is really key. So.
I just wanted to thank everybody here that there is the opportunity for the doors to be open at Trinity. We are all children of God at any age, and the best way for church or anything to grow is through generations. So praise God that there's an opportunity for more children and more people to say, I am a graduate of Trinity. And when I hear my kids singing about Jesus in the car and praying and just constantly talking about God, I can't tell you how that makes me feel. So thank you for considering the opportunity for more families to feel that way and to embrace what that Trinity has to offer.